Have you ever stopped to think that the money in your pocket might be the ghost of a nation that no longer exists? We accept currency as an absolute truth. We trust the seal, the weight of the metal, the promise printed on paper. But financial history isn't just made of what circulates in the light of day. It is often forged in silence. There are presses that operated off the books, mints that served global elites, and then vanished from the map, taking untold secrets with them. We are about to step into these forgotten corridors, where the invisible control of the economy shaped the world we know today. If you feel, as we do, that the true story of wealth hasn't been fully told yet, this is the place for you. Your presence here is vital to keep this flame alive. By liking and subscribing to the channel, you aren't just supporting a video, you are helping to reveal narratives that the system would prefer to keep buried. If this mystery resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments about the money we use every day. Your voice strengthens our investigation and allows us to reach more curious minds. But now, as the dust settles on these forgotten machines, a question echoes through the empty halls. What happens to the value created when the lights go out and authority collapses? The answer begins precisely where order ends. Case 1. Emergency mints created in times of collapse. Let's dive into the darkness, where official history rarely dares to tread. When we imagine the creation of money, the mind conjures images of maximum security, imposing granite buildings, rigid protocols, and unshakable bureaucracy. But reality, much like the tectonic plates of geopolitics, is unstable. During periods of collapse, be it civil wars, sudden invasions, or the silent crumbling of an economy under hyperinflation, that facade of order dissolves. It is in the chaos that true opportunities arise for those operating behind the scenes. And it is here that we find the phenomenon of emergency mints. These aren't institutions. They are desperate improvisations, set up in the basements of abandoned hotels, moving railway cars, or underground bunkers, while bombs fall on the surface. The transformation that occurs in these moments is visceral. The priority shifts from artistic precision or meticulous record-keeping to solely speed. Money needs to flow to pay soldiers, to bribe officials, to maintain the illusion that a government still breathes. But in the midst of this panic, a vacuum of accountability is created. The machines operate day and night, lubricated not just with oil, but with fear and urgency. And what is fascinating, yet simultaneously terrifying, is the mindset that takes hold of those who hold the keys to these temporary facilities. Without auditors, without official ledgers, and without the public eye, who can say how many extra boxers of banknotes were printed? Who controls the outflow of funds when the building is burning? The hidden truth of these periods is that accounting becomes fiction. Money produced off the books during a crisis doesn't disappear when peace is signed. It is siphoned off, hidden, converted into real assets and art, gold before the new regime can even begin to investigate. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the impact of this isn't limited to momentary theft. We are talking about the genesis of fortunes that shape the modern world, born from the smoke of collapsing empires. Think about the decisions made by those managing these clandestine presses. They knew the regime was doomed. They knew the paper itself would lose value, but possessing the value-making machine gave them absolute temporary power. It is a dark journey for currency, from an instrument of exchange to a tool for looting. Often, these emergency issues are deliberately designed to be indistinguishable from previous official issues, or so chaotic that no one can separate the legitimate from the illegitimate. And when the dust settles, the machines are dismantled, melted down, or thrown to the bottom of rivers. The records burned as fuel to warm the hands of the survivors. This elimination of evidence is the final act of a macabre magic trick. What remains are legends and rumors of missing gold. But the reality is more bureaucratic and cynical. The extra money was simply absorbed by the shadow economy. These revelations rarely make it into school history books, because stability requires us to believe in the sanctity of the financial system. Admitting that money can be and was created without control in critical moments is admitting that the value we chase every day is ultimately a fragile construct subject to the whims of whoever controls the ink and paper at the right moment. It is a reflection on human nature and the seduction of absolute power without oversight. The elites who emerged from these ashes didn't do so by luck, but because they understood that in a collapse, the lack of rules is the only rule that matters. If this insight into how chaos generates invisible opportunities resonates with you, WRITE, the word shadows, in the comments. I want to know who is truly paying attention to the nuances of the unspoken. And while you reflect on the weight of that word, remember that the collapse of a nation is just the beginning. Often, when one power falls, another is already waiting to take its place, bringing with it new forms of control and, of course, new ways to mint its own authority over the conquered peoples. Case 2. Colonial and occupation mints. If war is the hammer that shatters the physical borders of nations, currency is the invisible chain that binds populations to their new masters. When we move into the landscape of colonial and occupation mints, we enter territory where the financial architecture was designed specifically for extraction, not for stability. Imagine the mindset of an expanding empire. Upon arriving in a new territory, the priority isn't just to plant the flag atop the government palace, but to replace the economic lifeblood of that region. Local currencies are demonetized, collected, and often melted down, replaced by an occupation currency money minted specifically for that place, with lower purity standards and rigged exchange rates that always favor the metropolis. These mints operate under a cruelly efficient shadow regime. They are physical proof of subjugation. For decades, or even centuries, these machines stamped the face of the conqueror, normalizing his presence in every commercial transaction, from buying bread to paying taxes. However, the true mystery, and the true tragedy, reveals itself at the moment of collapse. History teaches us that no empire lasts forever, and when withdrawal becomes inevitable, we witness a frenzied journey of erasure. The shutting down of a colonial mint isn't an administrative process. It is a crime scene cleanup operation. The decisions made in those final hours are critical and ruthless. Gold reserves that backed the local currency are quietly loaded onto ships or cargo planes, bound for the empire's capital, leaving behind a hollowed-out economy and a population with pockets full of worthless metal or unbacked paper. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what happens next is a complete transformation of historical reality. When the gates of these facilities close and the soldiers leave, a time gap is created, a gray zone where the hidden truth about extracted wealth is buried. We aren't just talking about direct theft, we are talking about the systemic destruction of records. How many tons of silver were actually extracted? How many coins were minted beyond the limit to fund secret wars on other continents? Without the ledgers, which accidentally get lost or burned during the transition of power, we will never know. The impact of this is devastating and long-lasting. New nations are born in debt, trying to rebuild a monetary system from scratch, while the real value of their labor and natural resources was transferred ingot by ingot into the vaults of families and institutions that today pose as pillars of global financial respectability. This purposeful ambiguity is the fertile soil where legends of lost treasures grow, but the reality is much colder. The treasure wasn't lost, it was reabsorbed. It was melted down and reminted with new symbols, laundering its colonial origin and integrating into global markets without a trace of where it came from. It is a financial alchemy that converted suffering and exploitation into clean, inheritable capital. And the most disturbing part is that often the facilities themselves, the brick buildings and heavy press, like empty, silent shells, mute witnesses to a monumental looting. They remind us that money is, above all, a power relationship. Whoever controls the coinage controls the narrative of value, and when that narrative is abruptly interrupted, what remains is not just silence, but a gap in history where immense fortunes hid in plain sight. However, not all money manufactured in these contexts gets to fulfill its destiny of circulating from hand to hand. There are even stranger cases, anomalies that defy the logic of immediate profit. There are coins that were designed, approved, and minted by the thousands, but due to a twist of fate or a last-minute secret order, never saw the light of day. They remain trapped in limbo, stored in forgotten vaults, becoming numismatic ghosts before they were even born. If this reflection on how empires manipulate and then erase the wealth of nations has brought you a new perspective, comment the word empire below. Let's see how many of us understand the real weight of the history we carry in our pockets. Case 3. The coins that never entered circulation. There is a peculiar, almost sacred silence that inhabits the vaults where coins that were never born come to rest. We are accustomed to thinking of money as something alive, in constant motion, changing hands, traveling across continents, carrying the weight of daily transactions. But there is a category of wealth that lives in a state of permanent suspension, trapped in a limbo between creation and annihilation. Imagine the scene. Industrial presses, working to the limit of their capacity, minting millions of metal discs with the effigy of a leader, the coat of arms of a new republic, or the value of an expected economic reform. The machinery hums, the metal shines, the journey of that currency seems inevitable. And then, suddenly, an order arrives. A phone rings in a glass-walled room. A government falls. An economic strategy is aborted. Production stops. What was, seconds ago, the future promise of a nation instantly becomes toxic waste, physical proof of a failure, or a change of course that needs to be erased. The hidden truth in these corridors is that the official fate of these issues is almost always the furnace. The order is clear. Destroy everything, melt down every gram so the metal can return to being amorphous, without memory, ready to serve the next master or the next plan. However, this is where human nature intervenes in bureaucratic decisions. In the midst of this mass destruction process, small systemic failures occur, often intentionally. A mint employee, realizing the historical rarity of what he holds in his hands, slips a single specimen into his pocket. A director, foreseeing the future value of that anomaly, stashes a small batch in a private safe, far from the inventory logs. These actions, motivated by a mindset of preservation or greed, create some of the most valuable objects on the planet. The value of these pieces does not lie in what they can buy, but in what they represent. They are ghosts of an alternate reality, fragments of a history that was written but never published. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the financial impact of these leaks defies all logic of the conventional market. A coin that had a face value of pennies, upon being condemned to non-existence, undergoes an alchemical transformation. The fact that it is forbidden, that it is illegal, grants it an irresistible allure for the elite of global collectors. We are talking about closed-door auctions, held in private rooms of luxury hotels or through anonymous intermediaries, where a single one of these surviving specimens can be traded for millions. It is a supreme irony. The money that failed its mission to circulate among the people ends up circulating exclusively among the ultra, becoming a safe haven asset, a way to store value in an object that, officially, does not exist. These revelations lead us to question the very essence of value. If a coin withdrawn from circulation is worth more than all the money we have in our bank accounts, then value is, ultimately, a construct based on scarcity and secrecy. Behind the scenes, some say that certain test issues or errors are not accidental, but purposely manufactured by those who control the minting, creating artificial rarities to feed this parallel market. It is a game of shadows, where the line between error and intent fades, and while the public continues to use current currency, oblivious to these maneuvers, there are vaults housing these metallic witnesses of failed coups, of monetary unions that collapsed before sturdy, and of kings who died before their coronation. They are physical proof that history is fragile and that money is, above all, a political document. But if a simple coin can be hidden in a coat pocket, what happens when the secret is too big to be kept by just one person? What happens when it is not just the currency that needs to disappear, but the very factory that produced it? There are moments when the simple act of closing the door is not enough. There are moments when the very existence of the mint becomes a threat to the narrative of those in power. It is necessary to erase the structure, disperse the teams, burn the building plans. Silence, to be total, demands that the origin be forgotten. If the idea that there are untold fortunes based on money that should not exist has sparked your curiosity, WRITE. The word ghost in the comments. Let's see who can perceive the value of what is invisible. Case 4. Why some mints are destined for oblivion. We arrive now at the most unsettling point of our investigation, where stone and metal give way to the bureaucracy of oblivion. A mint isn't just a factory. It is a piece of evidence. Every press, every die, every ledger recording the entry and exit of precious metals constitutes forensic evidence of the health or the sickness of an economy. As long as the institution serves the purpose of the state, it is celebrated, guarded, and protected. But in a world driven by fluctuating interests and obscure geopolitical decisions, the moment arrives when the very existence of that factory becomes a risk, when financial accountability threatens to expose the fragilities or corruption of those in power. The strategy changes radically. Silence stops being a consequence and becomes an active policy. We aren't talking about bankruptcy or technological modernization. We are talking about strategic dismantling. The journey toward erasing a mint is methodical and cold. First, the archives are classified. What is technical and innocuous may be preserved in dusty warehouses. What is compromising and backed? Issuance orders, records of gold diversion, lists of beneficiaries of special batches receives different treatment. These documents enter what we call administrative limbo, classified as state secrets, with expiration dates that exceed a human lifespan. Then comes the physical structure. The machines, mechanical witnesses to inflation or theft, or vital parts are destroyed to ensure they can never mint a single coin again. The building, once an impenetrable fortress, is sold, demolished, or repurposed into something trivial, like an office complex or logistics warehouse. The architecture of power is thus whitewashed, and the hidden truth is buried under layers of fresh concrete and new paint. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the real cleanup operation doesn't happen on the walls, but in the mindset and human memory. What happens to the people who operated these machines? To the accountants who saw numbers that didn't add up? to the guards who saw trucks leaving at improper hours. Staff dispersal is an art form in the corridors of power. Key employees are forced into early retirement with generous pensions. Others are transferred to remote departments where their technical competence becomes irrelevant and their knowledge of the past useless. A witness vacuum is created. The official narrative is rewritten so that specific mint appears to have been merely a footnote, a minor and unimportant operation, when in truth it may have been the central engine of a massive wealth transfer. The impact of this deliberate elimination is that it severs the thread of history. Without the origin, there is no way to question the result. If we cannot prove where the money was made and where it was initially sent, we cannot question the legitimacy of the fortunes it generated. It is money laundering in its purest form. Not washing the banknote, but destroying the factory, those who planned ahead, who orchestrated the production, excess, or the diversion of reserves, counted on this moment of closure. The silence of the mint is the final seal of guarantee on their enrichment. What cannot be traced cannot be judged. And so, entire generations grow up without knowing that the inflation that destroyed their grandparents' savings, or the debt they are still paying today, had a physical origin in a specific place, managed by specific names who, thanks to this process of erasure, remain in the shadows, untouchable. These revelations force us to look at abandoned government buildings and industrial ruins with fresh eyes. What appears to be mere urban decay might actually be the scene of a perfect economic crime, left to rot so that nature can finish the job of concealment. The transformation of a site of power into a site of forgetting is the ultimate show of force by the elites. They have the ability not only to create value but to dictate what reality remembers and what it forgets. And while the public continues to debate the crumbs of the visible economy, the real banquet was served and cleared away, and the dining room was demolished before anyone could ask for the bill. However, no matter how much they try to cover their tracks, the financial system is based on trust and belief. And when we start questioning the foundations, we realize that trust is a fragile currency. If the origin can be erased, what guarantees the solidity of what we hold in our hands now? All of this leads us to a final reflection, not on the past, but on the very nature of the value we ceaselessly chase. If the idea that oblivion is a tool of power made you stop and think, write the word silence in the comments. I want to know who here can hear what isn't being said. We trust money because we believe in the system's narrative, in its rules, and in its official records. But history, as we have seen, shows us that true wealth is often born far from the light. When the mints fall silent, value doesn't disappear. It simply changes hands, protected by oblivion and the dust of time. The question that remains echoing isn't where the money went, but rather, who was there to collect the last coin when the machine stopped? If you value this kind of investigation and want to continue exploring the shadows of financial history, your subscription is what keeps this channel alive and focused on the truth. Leave a like if you felt the gravity of these revelations. It is a silent signal that we are tuned into the same frequency, and so I can know who had the courage to accompany me on this journey until the very last second. Write the phrase, "the last coin," in the comments. And stay curious.